Hey, thank you very much. Hey, everybody. I'm Dr. Tyler Wanke. I'm a serial medtech entrepreneur, investor, and professor, and I am the CEO and co-founder of MadSci, or Madison Scientific. At MadSci, we're developing electromechanical devices for the treatment of neurological diseases, including hydrocephalus. If you know anything about hydrocephalus, it's the buildup of fluid and pressure within the brain, and if untreated, it's commonly lethal, especially in kids. Another variant is later stage in adults called normal pressure hydrocephalus, which presents with dementia, gait instability, and urinary incontinence. Now, the current treatment for hydrocephalus is typically getting implanted with a shunt. It's a neurosurgical procedure whereby they implant a proximal catheter that drains excess fluid through a one-way mechanical valve that sits on the skull under the skin, and then to a distal catheter that drains that excess fluid elsewhere in the body, typically the peritoneum. And this relieves the pressure and is a life-saving procedure, especially in the case of kids. There's two big issues with shunts, however. The first one is that they fail all the time. Almost 40% fail within the first year in kids. It's also the number one problem in adults, and the vast majority fail within a couple years. So that's problem number one. The second problem is that when they fail, the diagnostics at monitoring and helping diagnose that shunt failure are very poor. They're costly, and lots of trips to the hospital could be avoided if we just knew what was going on inside the brain. So this is a typical patient journey, albeit for a pediatric patient. So you can see that patients commonly get diagnosed later in life and then go on to get numerous reoperation neurosurgical procedures to keep revising these failed shunts. All the while they have horrible symptoms like chronic debilitating headaches, perhaps issues with school or getting a job. And for them and their families, we've heard that they deal with a lot of anxiety, just wondering, is their shunt going to fail that day, and are they going to end up in the hospital, or perhaps worse? So this is Dr. Benny Iskandar. He's the head of pediatric neurosurgery at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and he's a MadSci co-founder. And he had it with all these shunts failing in his patients and just continuing to redo this procedure over and over again. So he raised some considerable grant funding and went out to figure out what is the physiology that is driving these devices to fail. And what he found is that it seems that the current technology is too simple, and it overdrains the patient until the brain literally gets sucked into the catheter, thus clogging the device. So you can see here there's some bumps or ependymal bands from within the brain there. That's the inside of the ventricle, a picture from an actual patient. And you can see how the bumps correspond with the holes of the catheter. And here's a video here showing this is a real patient. Let's see if we can get it here. And it is showing the brain tissue getting sucked into the holes of the proximal catheter. Right there, you can see it pretty clearly. So just the tiniest bit of overdrainage will literally pull the walls of the ventricle of the brain into the catheter holes over and over again until they obstruct. So that seems to be the main physiology. What's driving it? It seems to be pressure spikes due to normal things like coughing, sneezing, and really siphoning from sitting up and standing up, things that shouldn't cause failure in these patients. And to drive that home, Dr. Iskandar and colleagues did a clinical study, and they showed that if they could reduce overdrainage, albeit with existing technology, they could significantly reduce shunt failure by even mid-60s to mid-80s percentile reduction in shunt failure. However, after a couple years, with the current tech, these patients eventually fail. This here in the middle is Richard, one of his patients who had 150 neurosurgical procedures in his first decade and a half of life. And once we utilized the science from this sort of newfound physiology, he's gone a few years without needing a revision surgery. It's quite amazing. But to really solve this problem, we are developing the first-in-class smart shunt. It's an electromechanical version of a shunt valve, and it's roughly the same shape and size as the current shunt valves that get implanted today by neurosurgeons. The only difference is this one is packed with electronics, and it has a integrated intracranial pressure sensor that measures intracranial pressure and sends that data to the valve. And it essentially runs through our algorithms, and the valve is smart enough to know whether to open the valve and drain the fluid, if indicative of actual disease, or not open the valve in the case of red herrings like coughing, sneezing, et cetera. We believe it'll be a best-in-class therapeutic option and fail less than any other shunt. But beyond that, we think it can also be a significant advancement in the diagnostics and monitoring of this condition, because we can transmit that intracranial pressure and other data from the device to a patient-facing app and a physician-facing portal to help monitor the condition of the shunt in the patient, and hopefully help keep these patients out of the hospital. In terms of competition, the shunt valves today are mostly limited to dumb mechanical valves that neither reduce shunt failure more than any other valve, nor offer any advanced diagnostics like true intracranial pressure, clog detection, et cetera. In terms of intellectual property, we have a few issued patents licensed into the company from the University of Wisconsin, a few more pending, and so far, freedom to operate. Now, this is the patient journey I showed you earlier, but now with dollar signs attached. You can see up above the average shunt patient, pediatric in this case, and you can see that all these revision surgeries, which are tens of thousands of dollars, really add up. The trips to the hospital for huge workups really add up, and so these patients commonly get into the 6 figures or even into the 7 figures for their cost of care just for these shunt procedures and revisions. Contrast that to a smart shunt patient envisioned below. We think that we can significantly reduce shunt failure, likely by a factor of 3x or more, and thus reduce the average annual cost for these patients. Also, we think that we'll reduce the amount of cost spent on working out these patients in the hospital. So we think we can really bend the cost curve here for these patients. Looking at it at market size, we spend billions of dollars every year as healthcare systems taking care of shunt failure. So we think that by bringing out this technology, we can reduce the expenditures by hundreds of millions, if not over $1 billion, to the system, while increasing the size of the shunt market to a greater than $1 billion market globally. We'll start by targeting the current shunt procedures that are done. There's maybe a couple 100,000 done across the globe today. And you can see there's some opportunity for growth as a larger number of older patients age into and get diagnosed with normal pressure hydrocephalus. So that's a real opportunity to help these patients as well. To capitalize on this opportunity, we've put together quite an interdisciplinary team, including some experienced entrepreneurs. We have 4 exits totaling $2 billion amongst all of us. Of note here is Mike Nagy. He's our CTO, who was previously co-founder and CTO of Endotronics. They did an implantable pressure sensing device for heart failure and sold last year to Edwards for over $700 million. This team's been able to develop multiple iterations of the smart shunt prototype and show that it works on the bench and in animal studies. Here's some data from a recent chronic animal study that we did in sheep. And you can see that not only can the device transmit the intracranial pressure data and monitor that, but we give the sheep hydrocephalus by injecting fluid. And you can see that the device can correctly detect that the pressure gets too high. The valve opens and relieves the pressure until it goes down to a safe state and then recloses. That's the base algorithm. And all the while, it ignores pressure spikes that would otherwise cause shunt failure. Here's a quick look at the roadmap. We've done everything you've seen with a couple $1 million in pre-seed funding and grants. And we are raising a $5+ million Series seed round now to get the device through some advanced chronic animal studies to the final human-grade prototype and to move forward with our regulatory process with FDA. Traditionally, these devices are Class 2, believe it or not, for shunts. And we think that there's a great exit path to a large strategic like an Integra or Medtronic that's in this space. Obviously, CardioMEMS and Endotronics are heart failure analogs, but some huge $500 million to $700+ million exits recently, and lots of exciting companies in the space getting funded. I'm excited to say that we just announced this morning that we actually fully subscribed this $5 million round with $2 million in safes. It was a $7 million seed financing, so that fully subscribed in a couple of weeks. But we are oversubscribing the round to some extent over the weeks and short months to come. And I think that's all the time I have for today. So that's MadSci, and thanks for listening.